When police walked into the Ramsey home on the morning of December 26, 1996, they expected a kidnapping. They expected negotiations, instructions, panic, maybe even a hint of hope. What they did not expect was a crime scene collapsing under its own weight. Within the first few hours of the investigation, critical evidence was lost. Timelines were blurred, and the story of what happened to 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey became a maze that no one, not the Boulder Police Department, not the FBI, and certainly not the American public, would ever fully escape. Tonight we follow the investigation from the moment officers step inside that sprawling Boulder home to the interviews, the contradictions, the forensic confusion, and the early theory battles that shaped everything that came after. This is the Midnight Mystery Archive, and this is part 2 of the JonBenet Ramsey case. When Officer Rick French first entered the home just after 6 a.m., he didn't know he was walking into what would become a cautionary tale in investigative procedure. The Ramseys had called police around 5:52 a.m., reporting a kidnapping. A ransom note was left that was 3 pages long, with a demand for $118,000. Instructions specifically to not contact the authorities. But within minutes, officers were already breaking every rule of a kidnapping response. First, the house was not secured. More than 10 people were inside the crime scene before noon. Friends, a pastor, victim advocates, neighbors, people trying to do the right thing and help, but unknowingly destroying evidence as they moved through the house. Second, there was no immediate search for forced entry. Officer French opened the basement door, he looked inside, and then he closed it. He didn't walk down. He didn't clear the space. And behind those doors, just 2 rooms away, was JonBenet. This early call remains one of the most criticized decisions in the entire investigation. There were 8 hours of lost evidence. It was at 1 p.m. when an officer asked John Ramsey to search the home himself. Not a forensics team, not crime scene experts, John. He found his daughter. He moved her. He carried her up the stairs, and he placed her in the living room. And in that moment, every future forensic analysis of the scene was changed forever. After the discovery, the case pivoted instantly from kidnapping to homicide. But with that pivot came confusion and tension. When we look at the first interviews, Patsy was distraught, shaking, heavily emotional, and investigators noted that she was overwhelmed, inconsistent, difficult to interview, and not kept separate from John. One officer said she was not in any state to be questioned. Another said she avoided direct answers. With John, he was described as controlled, to the point some found unusual. But as we know, trauma affects people differently, and investigators knew not to draw conclusions purely based on emotional presentations. Still, these early behaviors became the seeds of decades of public interpretation and, frankly, doubt. There was a key problem. The DA's office intervened. The Boulder District Attorney's Office immediately urged police to be gentle, to not separate the Ramseys, and not conduct aggressive questioning. This, of course, made Boulder PD furious. They believed the Ramseys should have been interviewed separately that morning. Instead, lawyers were already involved and full interviews were delayed. And because of that delay, contradictions began to surface. First, we'll break down a few of the inconsistencies that investigators found early on. The first one, of course, was Patsy's morning routine. Patsy said she woke around 5:30 a.m. Officers felt she looked fully dressed and made up, more than a roll out of bed type of a state. But this is subjective. Still, it added unease. Then there was the ransom note. It was found on the stairs. It was 3 pages long. It was written with materials from inside the home. The last part changed everything. The note appeared to be practiced, written in multiple passes, inconsistent in capitalization, oddly cinematic, familiar to lines from films like Speed and Dirty Harry. Professionals called it one of the strangest ransom notes ever recovered. Then there was the ransom demand of $118,000. It matched John Ramsey's annual bonus almost exactly. Is it a coincidence? Inside knowledge? Or a deliberate misdirection? To this day, there's no consensus. Then there's the issue of the basement window. A broken window with a suitcase beneath it suggested a potential entry point. But was it broken months earlier, as John claimed? Were the cobwebs inside undisturbed? Were the marks consistent with human entry? Even today, experts disagree on that point. If you're enjoying this deep dive format, remember you can support the show for free, 100% free, just by following the podcast and leaving a quick rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It helps the algorithm recommend this podcast and all of the episodes we've done previous to new listeners. I appreciate you taking the time to do that, and if you can, make it a good review. Moving on. With the scene compromised, investigators turned to what evidence they could rely on. The DNA. Partial male DNA was detected on JonBenet's underwear, but it was low quality, possibly transferred in manufacturing, possibly contaminated, and not found consistently across other items. To this day, DNA remains the biggest wedge between the two schools of thought. The family did it, and the intruder did it. Then there's the ligature and the garrote. It was made from a cord, a broken paintbrush, both of which were found inside the home. But here's the key. The construction of the garrote has been called both simple and expert, depending on which forensic specialist you ask. That's a really wide gap. The knot remains one of the most fiercely debated aspects of the case. Then there's the head wound and the strangulation. JonBenet suffered a severe head fracture, followed by strangulation. Which came first? That has never been conclusively proven through forensic analysis. The sequence defines which theory you believe. By the end of week 1, law enforcement had formed into 3 separate camps with different theories. Theory 1 was the family theory. The topics that supported the idea of someone in the family doing harm to JonBenet and killing her are the note. That ransom note still leaves a lot of questions around the family. There was a lack of forced entry. Remember, the window mentioned earlier was never determined to have been the mode of entry for an offender. There was possible staging done based on the evidence. There were timeline inconsistencies. But the biggest reason that people hold to the family theory, especially in law enforcement, is that the materials used for the ransom note and for the murder weapon were all accessible from within inside the home. But there was no direct evidence tying the Ramseys to the crime, and that is an important point. Then, the other school of thought, or the second school of thought, is the intruder theory. This is supported by the DNA evidence. To this day, it does not match anybody inside the home. There's the basement window. Could that have been the mode of entry? There had been reports of prior trespassing in Boulder around that time. And there was some unusual neighborhood activity leading up to this crime. But critics often have asked, why write a long ransom note? It was very abnormal. Why risk time inside the home by writing the note and crafting the weapon used to kill JonBenet? And then why kill instead of kidnapping if the ransom note implied kidnapping? Then there's the third theory, and it's a hybrid. Some investigators believed an intruder did in fact enter the home, something went wrong, and the family staged a cover-up to avoid suspicion. This theory is highly controversial and widely debated, but it does exist among some in law enforcement. One of the unique aspects of the JonBenet Ramsey case is the media and the pressure and the public perception that has built up around the case. This is really where the case spiraled into the public arena. The Ramseys hired PR immediately. Police leaked information. The district attorney leaked counter information. Tabloids exploded. Now, I want to make a note about tabloids. At this time, I was in high school, and I can remember walking into just about any grocery store, and JonBenet Ramsey's face, it seemed like for months, was the face on every tabloid magazine at that time. Then there were documentaries, TV specials, news investigations, talk shows. Everyone had a theory as to what happened to JonBenet. The case became a national obsession, and in that storm, the actual evidence drowned. Even detectives admit the investigation became unrecoverable. It was lost virtually from day one. Next time in part 3, we're going to shift our focus to the suspects, the Ramseys, potentially neighbors, associates of the Ramsey family, and the intruder profiles investigators chased for years. What are the questions we're going to ask? Some of the most obvious: who had motive? Who had opportunity? And who has never been fully ruled out? This has been the Midnight Mystery Archive in part 2 of the JonBenet Ramsey case. Next Friday will be part 3 of the 5-part series. Also remember, Monday I will release a mini episode that will tie back to this part 2, where I hone in on a specific aspect of the part 2 episode and dig a little deeper. Until next time.